As the Rabbi would remind us, at any time we come together to not celebrate but to draw light, all of us who are participating here as well will be able to have the merit to receive from this extended light as well. But as we said, every Shabbat that we come to connect, we want to understand, although there are countless gifts that are given to us, what is unique about this Shabbat? What light is uniquely being gifted to us by the light of the Creator through our connection? And I'd like to focus on really one gift, one very important gift, one that is revealed only this one time in this Shabbat, in this week's portion. If you read the literal story, as we spoke last night, it is a list of what would seem to be physical laws. Human interaction, positive and negative, the effects, the consequences, and what the punishments are, what needs to be done. At one point in this week's portion, it says, if two people come into a fight, they have a physical fight, and one of them hits the other, then the consequence will be the person injured, he will be paid by the injuring party. He will pay him for the amount of work that he lost. Shivto yiten. And then it says, Verapo Yirape. Verapo Yirape means literally, and he should heal him. But of course, these people who've had the fight, one of them wasn't necessarily a doctor. It simply means that the injuring party must pay for the medical bills of the person whom he injured. Verapo Yirape. That's a literal story. But as the Kabbalists teach us, within every story in the Torah, the purpose is not the literal reading, but the secrets behind it. So what is the secret? What is the gift in those two words? Verapo Yirape. That healing should be brought to the injured party. So the Kabbalists teach, beginning with the great Kabbalist and commentator Rashi, he says the following. Mikan, we learn from here, Shenitna reshut larofim lerapot. If a person wanted to know whether spiritually it is right for doctors to heal, for medicine to heal, to use medicine in this way, this week's portion tells us, Verapo Yirape, that there is a blessing of the Creator in doctors, there's a blessing of the Creator in medicine, there's a blessing of the Creator in the process of healing. Verapo Yirape. Because, as the Kabbalists explain, one would have thought, as some people do think, that because a disease comes from beyond the person, it must be part of their process, of their spiritual process, of their soul's process in this world, and therefore maybe it's not right to have human intervention in that process. This week's portion tells us two things. We know not only because we don't talk about permissibility, but rather the fact that there is actually a blessing, light from the Creator that is infused into the medical process, into the work of the doctor, into the work of the medicine. Mikan shenitna reshut larofe lerapot. We learn that there is a blessing, that there is light in the process of healing, human intervention. Those of us who study at the center, we know that there's another portion of the year that brings us healing. And that is the portion of Beshalach. And there it speaks of a healing that comes from the Creator. Ani Hashem Rofecha, which literally means, I, the light of the Creator, is your healer. The difference, of course, between this week's portion and Beshalach is that in Beshalach, it speaks about the healing that comes from the Creator. We know that there are times of miraculous healing that comes directly from the Creator, that is not awakened, created by man. That's the healing that we can draw during the portion of Beshalach. But this Shabbat is Verapo Yirape. It's healing that is brought upon, that is awakened by man. What is the difference between those two? What is the difference between healing that is brought directly by the light of the Creator and healing that is brought by a process of a doctor or medicine? this is something that is both important to understand and important to know what we can do about it. What is the difference between healing brought by medicine, by a doctor, and healing that is brought directly by the light of the Creator? So one of the great Kabbalists, Rabbeinu Bachye, says the following. In this week's portion, Verapo Yirape, on those two words that speak of the healing that is blessed, healing that is sent by the Creator through a doctor, through medicine. Kol refuah bebasar vadam. Every time we find healing that is spoken of, that is through human intervention, that is brought by a doctor, that is brought through the use of medicine, lo matzanua bechol haktuvim ki im bedagesh. Thank you. Whenever we find it written about a doctor bringing healing, we always find, and this is a grammatical difference but an important one, that the healing that is spoken of is with a dot inside. In Hebrew, there's two ways to pronounce the letter pei. You can pronounce it pei if it has a dagesh inside, if it has a dot inside, or you can pronounce it fei if it does not have that dagesh, if it does not have the dot inside. Rabbeinu Bachye says that dot actually represents pain, that dot represents difficulty. And he says whenever you find healing that is brought about by a person, by a doctor, by medicine, whenever it's mentioned in the writing, in the Torah or in the prophets or in the writings, there's always a dagesh, always a dot inside, which represents the fact that although healing can occur and will occur, it has a process to it. It has some pain attached to it. It has difficulty attached to it. But he says whenever we find written about healing that comes directly from the Creator, as we find, for instance, in Beshalach, it says Rof'echa, and the pei does not have the dot inside. It represents the healing that does not have any process with it, does not have any pain with it. So there's a difference, Rabbeinu Bachye tells us, between healing that is awakened directly by the light of the Creator, that is never mentioned with that dot inside which represents judgment, and healing that is brought about by a person, by a doctor or through medicine, that although brings healing but has a process with it and has pain with it. Reb Chaim Vital, the great student of the Ari, mentions the same thing in this week's portion. That the difference, and it's interesting, you look through the writings, for instance in Jeremiah and Yirmiyahu, we find where he asked the Creator for healing, he says, Refa'eni Hashem ve'erafeh. He asked the Creator for healing, and there again in Jeremiah, there's no dot inside the pei, because that type of healing, which he was asking for and received, was coming directly from the light of the Creator. And that one does not have any pain attached to it, any process attached to it. So, a very interesting and important understanding, that when healing is brought about by man, through doctors, through medicine, although the light for that is awakened on this Shabbat, it's still a process. It still has pain with it. But there is another type of healing, a healing that is brought directly from the Creator, and that type of healing does not come with pain. So what can we do? How can we make sure that all healing that we or those around us go through can be with a diminished level of that pain, a diminished level of that, what the Kabbalists will come to see referred to as judgment? So I want to share with you a very important and very powerful section from the Zohar Chadash, from the Zohar. As some of you might know, the Zohar was printed twice at least. It was found at two different times. There's a Zohar that's called the regular Zohar, and then later on they discovered from the same writings, of course, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, other sections of the Zohar, and that was printed separately and called the Zohar Chadash, the new Zohar, which just means it was a new printing of new found sections of the Zohar. In the portion of Balak, there's a very interesting story. And as I mentioned when I spoke to the Chevra about this week, whenever we read a section from the Zohar, we not only gain wisdom and understanding, but we also are able to awaken the light, awaken the energy of which the Zohar speaks of. And this is the story. It's a lengthy story. We won't read all of it, but at least the important parts. The story is about the group of students who were around Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, foremost his son Rabbi Elazar. And they were traveling, it says. Azlu Chevraya, the friends, as they were always referred to, Rabbi Elazar and the other students of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai were traveling. V'shimsha hava takif lachada, and the sun was very strong. And we know that this represents judgment. It represents harsh decrees, negativity. When the sun is that strong, it says. Chamu ahu beichakal, and they found in the middle a clearing with shade over it, a beautiful place to rest from the heavy sun. And there was water there. V'ilani chakla sagian yatve taman. And so Rabbi Elazar and the friends decided, we'll take a rest and we'll sit here in the shade by the water. Amar Rabbi Elazar said, Kama yeot atar da l'naichabe. This is the place to rest. This place will bring us respite. Adahar v'yatve. As they're sitting there, as Rabbi Elazar and the other friends are sitting there, Hachivya ravreva ate. A great snake. And we know that the snake represents judgment again, represents left column, represents negativity. A great snake comes towards them. So Amar le Rabbi Elazar, as the snake was passing by, and we know that this story again, even though this physical story probably occurred, it is the secrets behind it, the deeper understanding behind it that is important. So Rabbi Elazar stops the snake, and the snake, as we said, represents judgment, represents negativity. Rabbi Elazar stops the snake, and he speaks to him. We know that the great Kabbalists, certainly Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Elazar, the Ari, they had the ability to interact with animals. So he stops the snake, Rabbi Elazar does. Amar le chivaya chivaya satilach me'orchach. Rabbi Elazar says to the snake, go away from your path, which means the snake was about to do harm to somebody, as we will come to see, was about to cause pain or maybe even death. And Rabbi Elazar is telling him, go away. Don't damage that person. Don't bring damage to that person. Why? That person who, I guess, in his life had done negative things to other people, had damaged other people, and therefore deserved some damage to come to him. Rabbi Elazar tells the snake, although it is true at one point he wasn't changing, he was still hurting other people, he was still damaging other people, but now he's changed. Rabbi Elazar says to the snake, from the time that you were told that this person needs to be harmed because of the actions that he has done, he has changed. And therefore Rabbi Elazar says to the snake, go away from your path. This entire story, as we said, does not simply represent the story of Rabbi Elazar and this man and the snake, but rather represents judgment coming down to this world and finding a way to remove it. Finding a way to take away the damage that is awakened, in this case, by the person's action. So Rabbi Elazar has this whole interaction with the snake. Again, the story continues, but at this point, Rabbi Elazar succeeds in removing this judgment, in removing this negativity from this person. We fast forward towards the end of the story, and the friends, they want to learn from Rabbi Elazar, how were you able to see this? How were you able to see the judgment and negativity? And this really is the level of the Kabbalists, and the level that all of us can come to in some degree, being able to see and being able to interact, and of course, most importantly, being able to remove judgment. Amma Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba, one of the friends, one of the students of Rabbi Shimon, who was with Rabbi Elazar on this trip, on this miraculous trip where Rabbi Elazar saved the life of this other person. Rabbi Abba says to him the following: Bechol orchada itavau, bechol madechamina. He says, everything we've seen on this trip is very surprising, very difficult to understand. He said at the end though, but for Rabbi Elazar, his ability to see what is going on beyond the five senses, his ability to see what is going on for this person, that was the greatest one. How did you achieve it? How were you able to see? Rabbi Abba asks Rabbi Elazar. He says to them, Rucha dili estakel. My soul, my spirit is able to see. Ve'ana chameina ki'ilu be'eina chameina. And my ability to see, when I look into the future, it's like a person, it's like all of us see with our physical eyes. Rabbi Elazar was able, through his spiritual work and elevation, his connection, of course, to the light of the Zohar, to the light of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, to get to a state, he says, where my view into the future, my view into the positive and negative energies that are around, and the judgment and the ability to remove it, is like all of you, he says to them, are able to see with your physical eyes. That's the state to which Rabbi Elazar ascended, through his spiritual work, through his connection to his father, to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, in the light of the Zohar. At this point, again, Rabbi Elazar has saved the life of a person. And it's important, those of us who study from the Zohar, you come to see that no section or teaching or story is separate from the rest. They're all connected. So Rabbi Elazar saves the life of this person, and this person is about to teach us now a tremendously important lesson. They sit down with the man. They find the man that Rabbi Elazar saved, who again had transformed, where judgment was meant to come to him, and Rabbi Elazar was able to remove that judgment. And they sit together and they tell him the whole story, and he understands it because he realized that there was tremendous judgment, negativity that was about to come down to him. Patach ve'amar. So he begins to teach, to reveal a secret. Refa'eni Hashem ve'erafe. This is the verse from Jeremiah that speaks about healing, and as we said, this healing spoken of here is healing that comes from the Creator. Kevan de'amar refa'eni ma'u ve'erafe. So he asks, what's the purpose of repeating the concept or the word for healing twice? Jeremiah says, refa'eni, heal me, Hashem, the tetragrammaton or the light of the Creator, ve'erafe, and then I will become healed. Why the man who was healed himself, he asks, why does Jeremiah mention the word for healing twice? Ve'ela kol asvata de'alma. Rather, the man says and reveals, all healing in the world, biyada dekudsha berichu, comes from the light of the Creator. Aval it minhon al yada deshlicha. Sometimes the healing comes through a messenger, a doctor, medicine, a process. Ve'it minhon deloit masron l'shlicha. And there's some healing that is brought to this world that does not have an intermediary. It comes directly from the light of the Creator. Ve'inun de'it masru biyada d'shlicha. And this is very important. Healing that is given over to a messenger, asvata inun. Yes, it has the potential and the ability to bring healing. Avalazimna mithadrin. But sometimes, healing that is brought through an intermediary has the ability to heal for a while, and then that disease can come back. But healing that is able to be drawn directly from the light of the Creator, that disease, that pain does not return. And therefore healing that is drawn directly from the light of the Creator is healing that has no judgment, has no negativity attached to it. So we learn now from this man whose life was saved by Rabbi Elazar that although there are two types of healings that have blessings within them, one brought by intermediaries and through medicine and so on, but that type of healing does not always make sure that the disease does not return. Healing, he says, that comes directly from the light of the Creator, that healing can be healing that is complete, healing that does not allow the disease to return, healing that has no negativity with it. So, we want to understand first this story. Because in this story there seems to be the intermediary. In this story, as we learned, it was Rabbi Elazar who assisted the healing and the removal of judgment from this person. So what does it mean when he says that there are two types of healing? Does it mean that every single time, for instance, that one uses medicine or one goes to a doctor, that type of healing cannot have the blessing of making sure the disease never comes back? Does that healing not have the ability to make sure that there's no negativity with it? It can't be the case, because even in the case of the Zohar, there was an intermediary. It was Rabbi Elazar who assisted the healing. Rather, there's a deeper understanding here, and also that comes with a meditation which is so important. and so powerful. The Kabbalists teach that the world of nature, the world within which we live, the world, and the word in Hebrew is teva, the natural world within which we live, comes from one of the names of God, one of the names which is called Elokim. The numerical value of nature is the same numerical value as Elokim. And therefore the world within which we live has both positive and negative, because the name Elokim, although it brings light, it comes from what we call Kabbalistically left column, it has judgment with it. And therefore, an individual, the Kabbalists teach, who sees the world as a world of complete nature, and medicine being a part of it, and doctors being a part of it, and that healing process being a part of it, they connect only to that name Elokim. And yes, as we learn in this week's portion, healing can be brought through that name, but it is a name that also has attached to it judgment. This is the world, as the Kabbalists teach, of Etz Hadat Tov Vera, tree of knowledge, good and evil. Everything has positive and negative to it. And therefore medicine of this world, of this natural world, has positive and negative to it. Yes, it brings healing, but again there's a tinge of what the Kabbalists call dinim, or judgment, to it. But there's a way to change that. And this is why it's so important, and this is one of the greatest gifts given to us on this Shabbat. And as we learn this again, as we think about ourselves or others around us who need this light of healing, or those who we know need this light, we think about them as well. Very simple meditation. We know that the way we draw the light to the Creator is through these channels that are called the names. So, conscious or unconscious, when you live within the realm of nature, you are connecting to the name Elokim, and you are drawing light, yes, but light that is tinged with judgment. What we need to do, the Kabbalists teach, and this is the secret of the verse in Jeremiah. Whenever an individual is going through a process of healing, yes, using a doctor, and yes, using medicine, and yes, going through that process, they have to meditate, they have to be conscious of the fact that they are drawing light from the realm of Elokim, and they envision that name, Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem, and know that there is blessings in that, and there's light in that, but rather what we ask is that it does not stop there, that the name Elokim actually becomes a resting place for the more elevated name, what's called the Yud Kei Vav Kei, or the Tetragrammaton. The Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, draws light from the realm where there is no judgment, from the realm that the Kabbalists call the Etz HaChaim, the tree of life. And therefore the Kabbalists teach, when you meditate, when you have a consciousness in every process of healing, that there is the name Elokim, which is the natural process of healing, but on top of that, you are drawing the light from the Etz HaChaim, from the tree of life, which is drawn through the channel of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, of the Tetragrammaton. Then you draw light, as the Zohar tells us, from the realm that removes the disease forever, from the realm that brings healing without any pain attached to it. That's what this Shabbat is about. And as we know, we're talking about healing, but it's not just about healing. It's about every single important process that we go through in this life. Everything that is going through a regular process is from the name of Elokim. Again, which represents, yes, the light of the Creator, but light that comes from the realm that's called Etz Hadat Tov Vera, tree of knowledge, good and evil. So in every important process that you're going through, you have to, as often as you can do this, certainly on the important processes, the more pure it can be. So you meditate that the Elokim, or the natural process that you're going through, that's the light of the Creator. But what you want to draw to that process is the Yud Kei Vav Kei, is the pure light of the Creator that comes from the realm that is called the Etz HaChaim, the tree of life. And then you inject into that process the purity of the world, of the light that has no judgment with it, that has no negativity with it. That's the meditation. And that's what's given to us on this Shabbat. All of us, to some degree or another, are going through certain processes. And if they're important, certainly if they're healing processes, certainly if there are other processes, we want to make sure that we are injecting not just the realm of nature, even if it's of the light of the Creator, but it is still of the world of Etz Hadat Tov Vera, tree of knowledge, good and evil, with always has positive but a negative tinge to it as well. And rather what we want to have the strength and the ability to do is to draw down the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, through this meditation, into certainly every medical process, every important process that we go through, so that healing, so that process can end with a connection directly to the Etz HaChaim, to the tree of life. And that's why Jeremiah, when he says, Refa'eni Hashem ve'erafeh, he means, yes, there's a process of healing that I'm going through, there's a process that is coming from the light of the Creator, from the realm of Elohim, but I meditate all the time and I ask all the time that the Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, that channel of light that is pure, that comes from the tree of life, enters and is injected into every step of the physical process. Then I know ve'erafeh, then I know that the healing will be complete healing, that the light revealed at the end will be filled with light and no judgment attached at all. And that's the gift of this Shabbat. And therefore when the Zohar tells us, Inun dekudsha berichu maseh, when we, it's not the light of the Creator, when we draw that light from the realm of the Etz HaChaim through the channel of the Tetragrammaton, to every process, if it's a process of healing or any other process that we go through, Hahumara lo ithader le'almin, that problem never comes back. Iu asveta deleit ba mar aklal. It is a healing, it is a process that ends without any judgment, without any negativity attached to it at all. You know, sometimes when we learn a teaching, it's one that we can keep with us for a few days, for a week. This secret, this teaching that the Zohar gives us, that the Kabbalist teaches, is something that we have to use all the time. Especially when we're going through processes. Because the Zohar here and the Kabbalists have given us the way to make sure that every process that we go through comes directly from the realm that we call the Etz HaChaim, the tree of life, comes directly from the light of the Creator, and therefore it is a complete healing, it is a complete process that does not allow any deen, any judgment to come back again. Shabbat Shalom.